In the cold lands of 16th century Hungary, a girl was born into immense privilege, power, and something far darker. Elizabeth Bathory, born in 1560 into one of the most powerful aristocratic families in Transylvania, was not merely a noble heiress, she was destined to become a legend. Raised in the shadow of war, cruelty, and politics, she witnessed more horrors in childhood than most do in a lifetime. Torture, executions, and violent justice were routine in her world. At just 6 years old, she was said to have watched a man sewn into the belly of a dying horse for punishment. Such was the world that shaped the mind of the girl who would one day be called the Blood Countess. Highly educated for a woman of her time, Elizabeth was fluent in Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek. She was intelligent, charismatic, and trained in managing estates, uncommon power for any noblewoman. Married at 15 to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, a formidable soldier known as the Black Knight of Hungary, Elizabeth ruled over the vast Countess castle while her husband fought the Ottomans. During this time, she managed the entire estate, presided over legal disputes, punished servants, and gained a fearsome reputation for discipline and pride. But rumors of cruelty began to trickle from the walls of her castle. Peasant girls who went to serve the noblewoman were never seen again. When Count Nadasdy died in 1604, something changed, or perhaps, something was unleashed. Without her husband to restrain her, Elizabeth's punishments allegedly grew darker, more twisted. Whispers turned into fearful accusations. Girls chained to walls, beaten until their flesh tore, pricked with needles, burned, frozen, or forced to eat their own flesh. Most damning of all was the claim that Elizabeth bathed in their blood, believing it kept her youth intact. The aristocracy remained silent, perhaps out of fear or loyalty. But by 1610, the death toll could no longer be ignored. King Matthias of Hungary ordered an investigation, led by Georg Thurzo, the Palatine of Hungary. When Thurzo raided Countess Castle on December 29, 1610, what he claimed to find shocked the world. A dead girl lay nearby, another was barely clinging to life, and several mutilated bodies were said to be found buried on the grounds. Servants were arrested and interrogated under torture. They claimed Elizabeth had tortured and killed over 600 girls in cold blood. But despite the horrifying confessions, Elizabeth herself was never brought to trial. She was instead walled up in her castle, confined to a single room with no windows. There she remained until her death 4 years later in 1614. Was she truly the greatest female serial killer of all time, or was she the victim of a brutal conspiracy? The investigation into Elizabeth Bathory's alleged crimes is one of the most bizarre and complex events in medieval history. What makes it so compelling is that while her reputation is soaked in blood, the evidence against her is surprisingly murky. During the 1610 investigation, more than 300 witnesses were called, many testifying that Bathory tortured and murdered girls using terrifying methods, burning them with hot irons, stabbing needles under fingernails, sewing mouths shut, even forcing them to strip and roll in snow until they died of exposure. These accounts were vivid and grotesque, but most were secondhand, based on rumors rather than direct observation. Her loyal servants, Dorothea Schenz, Ilona Jo, Katerina Benica, and Janos Ujberi, confessed under torture. And as any historian knows, confessions gained through agony often reflect the desires of the interrogator more than the truth. The claim that Elizabeth murdered over 600 girls came from one tortured servant who said she had seen a diary listing all the victims. This diary has never been recovered. No physical record of it exists. Some victims were supposedly peasants lured with promises of court life. Others were said to be noble girls, but their families never came forward to complain or claim their daughters. No noble house ever sought revenge. That silence is deafening. The real turning point of the investigation was the political context. Elizabeth, now a widow, was extremely wealthy and powerful. She owned more land than the king himself and had no male protector. Her cousin was Prince Gábor Bathory, an enemy of the Habsburgs. King Matthias owed her late husband a large debt, one he would be freed from if Elizabeth were convicted and her lands seized. Was her downfall a convenient way to eliminate a rival and cancel a royal debt? Her family negotiated a deal. Elizabeth would never be tried publicly, but she would also never be free. It was a political solution, cloaked as justice. She was entombed in her own castle, given only food through a small opening. Her guards reported that she would often cry out in the night, talking to unseen victims, or perhaps trying to clear her name. In August 1614, she was found dead, slumped beside the wall. Some say she died of illness, others believe she was driven mad. Even in death, Elizabeth Bathory's name became legend. In the centuries that followed, her story twisted into myth. The vampire countess who bathed in blood, a Hungarian Dracula, the evil noblewoman who slaughtered innocents for vanity. But how much of it was real? Elizabeth Bathory's image is today a mixture of folklore, feminist tragedy, and historical horror. She's been the subject of books, plays, operas, and horror films. The archetype of the blood-bathing woman has become a Gothic horror staple, and her name echoes beside those of Vlad the Impaler or Jack the Ripper. But unlike them, the truth about Elizabeth Bathory remains deeply contested. Modern historians have re-examined the original documents from the trial, many of which are ambiguous or contradictory. The testimonies are full of inconsistencies. No autopsy reports, no mass graves of hundreds of girls, no noble family ever protested her alleged slaughter of their daughters. Could it be that the peasants who accused her were bribed or pressured to give false testimony? Or that the tales of her blood rituals were exaggerated over generations of folklore and political manipulation? Some scholars argue Elizabeth was a victim of a gendered power play. In a male-dominated world, a wealthy, independent, intelligent woman managing vast estates was dangerous. She punished her servants harshly, but so did most nobles of her era. Her crimes may have been real, but no worse than what was common. The legend of blood bathing. That myth only appeared decades after her death. There is no record of blood rituals in the original charges. That part was likely added in the 18th century, sensationalized by historians and later embraced by horror writers. Yet we can't entirely exonerate her either. Something happened at Countess Castle. The disappearances were real. Her servants were terrified. Some even testified voluntarily. The cruelty may not have reached the levels of legend, but it existed. Elizabeth may not have bathed in blood, but she likely ordered brutal punishments, some fatal. Whether she was a sadist, a scapegoat, or both remains unclear. The truth lies somewhere between horror and history. In the end, Elizabeth Bathory is both a monster and a mystery, a woman who may have committed unthinkable acts or suffered the greatest injustice of her time. The blood-soaked legend of the Countess endures not just because of its horror, but because of the questions it still leaves unanswered. Who was Elizabeth Bathory? The greatest female killer in history, or a noble woman crushed by politics, myth, and fear? You've just witnessed one of the darkest punishments in history. But many more still lurk in the shadows. So if you dare, subscribe to Torture Vault, where every scream from the past still echoes.